Welcome, ghosts and ghouls. My name is Linus Graves, but you may call me Mr. Graves, and welcome to the Graven Manor. I regret to inform you all that you are trapped here with me forever. There is no hope of escape, no chance to survive. So, make yourself at home, ghosts and ghouls, or we are going to have one hell of a time. Today we are actually going to do something a little bit differently than what I usually do. I've been thinking about other ideas for content that I wanted to make, and so I thought I would try something a little bit different. And this is a subject that I think would be interesting anyways. So, without further ado, we are going to go through my top 5 types of horror that is out there. We're going to start with the first one. Now, the first one is near and dear to me for a few reasons, and the reason why is because, one, it was my first true experience of horror on a level that I had never experienced before, and it is still to this day one of my favorite series of all times, Silent Hill. And that leads into our first category for horror, which is psychological horror. Now, psychological horror, a lot of you are familiar with, I'm sure. There's been plenty of movies and video games made in this category. Silent Hill being one of the biggest ones, of course, and all of the spin-offs thereof. There have been tons of games now that imitate it. The song I've been playing on my, the game that I've been playing on my channel is definitely in that category, Song of Horror. And some of these categories you'll probably notice kind of bleed into each other a little bit. You can actually have multiple of these categories in one work, which is really cool. But yes, psychological horror, definitely good. Another perfect example of a movie that I think does psychological horror very well is The Shining. If you haven't seen The Shining, go watch it. It's an amazing, unsettling movie. It is just so disturbing on so many levels. The visually, aesthetically, the music in it, it's an absolutely incredible movie, and it just leaves you feeling very uncomfortable, and by the end you feel kind of icky, but not in a bad way. That movie blew my mind in a lot of the same ways that Silent Hill originally blew my mind a long time ago when I first played it. But Silent Hill and things of that nature are very, very near and dear to me. So that is why that is my number one genre of horror. Essentially, the key elements here is, one, it messes with your head. Two, it makes you question everything going on, including whether the characters themselves are sane or whether even you yourself are sane as the audience. It also makes you wonder what's real and what isn't, what can hurt you and what can't. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in that genre. So, with that out of the way, number 2 is my genre. It's the genre of this channel, if you couldn't tell already, Gothic Horror. Now, this is a very wide spectrum of things. You know, Lady in Black comes to mind, right? All the old classic horrors, you know, Frankenstein, Dracula especially, you know, the werewolf, all the typical vampire-y stuff, right? Hellsing Ultimate if you're into anime, and all these really kind of dark horror, Victorian aspect kind of gothic genre. My outfit itself kind of fits right into that. Gothic horror is obviously aesthetically my favorite, because it's just such a unique atmosphere, and it really just oozes with just all kinds of dark but poetic kind of horror, and it's usually a creeping dread that just kind of slowly builds up and just gets creepier and creepier as it goes on. Sleeping Hollow is a perfect example of this, especially Tim Burton's version, if you've seen it. I'm trying to think of games that would fit into this. Bloodborne, one of my recent favorites, definitely fits into this Gothic horror, especially on that one. Some other games that might fit into this, maybe to a certain extent Dark Souls itself. A lot of the Souls games can kind of fit into that, with the exception of Sekiro. That one's kind of its own thing, more Japanese horror. A lot of the Souls games kind of fall into that Gothic horror aesthetic. Castlevania is another perfect example of this. Number 3 involves a lot of tentacles. I'm sure you can guess where this is going. Not there Not there, you dirty perverts. No, number 3 is Lovecraftian horror. So Lovecraftian horror kind of is a large over-encapsulation of a bunch of other types of horror, mainly based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. It involves things like cosmic horror, body horror, psychological horror to an extent as well. Like, it combines a lot of these other aspects into it. But it's an umbrella term for anything that resembles H.P. Lovecraft, and more specifically uses the Lovecraft mythos. So all the works of H.P. Lovecraft, of course, fall into this. Bloodborne, again, falls into this, actually. The game that I mentioned before. It makes a lot of references to the ideas in Lovecraft's mythos, although without referencing it specifically. But it does borrow heavily from it, which is nice. So it's a very good example of that too. Song of Horror has a little bit of that too, not as much. Goosebumps, believe it or not, the show has some Lovecraftian elements to it too. Not everything in there is Lovecraftian, but a lot of it is. Another thing is, believe it or not, there's been a few movies made out of a Lovecraft story, but from what I've seen, they're not all that great. They're kind of hit or miss, depending on which one you see. Still waiting for a really good movie, but I mean, of course, the most famous is Call of Cthulhu, the game, and I'm still waiting for like a really big budget Hollywood movie make of that, because I think that would be amazing. But yes, any of Lovecraft's stories would be perfect for that. That's number 3. So number 4, supernatural horror. A lot of the show itself, supernatural, or most of your typical ghost stories that you usually hear around the campfire. There's been tons of movies from this, anything from The Conjuring to The Exorcist to almost every other modern supernatural horror out there. You know, The Nun, the Ouija, like all these, anything having to do with like ghosts or spirits or demons or angels or anything like that is definitely going to fall under supernatural horror. There's been all kinds of games on this. I mean, almost the vast majority of horror, I would argue, out there does involve some kind of supernatural element, but the supernatural horror itself specifically kind of focuses on these. There are some really good ones and there's some really bad ones. One of the best examples I've seen of this is the movie Poltergeist. That movie is very, very creepy, but very, very well done. There's a lot of disturbing things in that movie, but it's done very, very well. So that's a very, very good example of supernatural horror. The show is supernatural. While I wouldn't necessarily call it horror specifically, it's more of an action show with horror elements. I would place it under this category. Infamous and like all these kind of, anything that has to do, like I said, with ghosts or spirits is definitely going to fall under this category. So I think that's the most well known on our list. That is my number 4. And last but not least, number 5. Your typical slashers. Now, slashers aren't bad. I don't dislike them, and they're on my top 5 for a reason. They're just fun to watch. They're not necessarily what I would call overly scary. There definitely has some disturbing moments to them for sure. My favorite probably being the original Halloween. But this would be, you know, anything from like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. This would be Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Like all of these different famous classics of horror. That would be my number 5. Not so much specifically because those are really scary to me. I don't actually find them particularly frightening. Personally, I just think they're fun to watch. They're just entertaining. They have a fairly straightforward concept. They can definitely be disturbing in their own right, for sure. But they're just so much fun to watch. They're just kind of something you can just go to when you're bored and always get kind of a satisfied feeling of entertainment out of it. They're just good horror movies to watch when you don't know what else to watch. But yes, that is my list of top 5 horror genres. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know down in the comments below, and let me know what else you would like to see my top 5 of, and I would gladly do more videos like this. But yes, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, Ghosts and Ghouls. And don't forget to check out my Twitch channel as well. I do stream 3 days a week. I will put that link in the description below. So with that said, Ghosts and Ghouls, if you like this video, I hope to see you again. And remember, mind the spirits.